What were the top 10 reasons the Vikings didn't win the Super Bowl? Well, I'm going to go back to a video I made before the season where I listed the top 10 reasons they would win the Super Bowl. The top 10 reasons why the Vikings are going to win the Super Bowl. Before I do, I also have some honorable mentions that I want to list off for why they didn't win the Super Bowl. Number one would be my ex-wife. I did a video on the Vikings win probability against the Giants in that first playoff game. The win probability is 0.56. It's kind of a coin flip. So the one thing that we need to tip the scale is for my ex-wife. And that could really push the Vikings over the top. When going through what actually happened, based on my equation, they had a 2% win probability. When you didn't take into account my ex-wife and her connecting with the Giants players. And in order to make the win probability over 50%, she would have had to get with, I think, 49 of the 53 Giants players to kind of distract them. And so clearly she didn't step up. So she's one of the reasons they didn't win. The Zoltar Machine and Wisconsin Dells is another reason. Zoltar Machine was in this movie Big from like the late 1980s, a Tom Hanks movie where he wishes he could be big and his wish is granted and he becomes big. Right before me, my daughter wished and the card came out and said, your wish is granted. And then I wished that the Vikings would win the Super Bowl. And I got this weird, you shouldn't want instant gratification, blah, blah, blah. So Zoltar refused to grant my wish that the Vikings would win the Super Bowl. So I blame him. And then last, honorable mention, I would throw some blame at Kirk Cousins. You're just not going to win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. It's just a fact. I'm sorry to say it. You're just not going to. What are the top 10 reasons? Let's just go through them. Let's go back to my video from before the season. Number 10 reason I thought they would win was no more Mike Zimmer. I thought they would be better in-game coaching than they had under Mike Zimmer. And I would say they didn't. Just as many bonehead kind of calls. And in fact, the coaching was worse on the defense. Ed Donatel was far worse than Mike Zimmer. So, no, that's one reason they didn't win for sure. Downgrade in coaching, despite getting rid of Mike Zimmer. Number 9, addition by subtraction. Losing Anthony Barr, I was really excited about. And, finally getting rid of Everson Griffin, I was excited about. But that only goes so far when you don't actually replace them with anybody. You watch, like, the teams that are still in the playoffs, like the defenses that are still in the playoffs, like the Eagles and the 49ers. I think the 11th best player on these defenses that are still playing are better than the best player on the Vikings defense. And so getting rid of Anthony Barr, well, we didn't lose anything, went from weakness to weakness. So that is a reason we didn't win. And that's a reason we're going to be in trouble next year. Number 8, better effort from Patrick Peterson. I was expecting better effort just because you couldn't possibly have worse effort than he gave his first year with the Vikings. And I would say, no, we didn't get better effort. He made a couple plays here and there. 95% of the game, he was just jogging around the field and everyone else was so bad. Like the cornerbacks on the other side of the field were so bad, they didn't throw it at him that often. But when they did throw it at him, the receivers were generally wide open. So that is a reason that they didn't win, Patrick Peterson. Number 7. Garrett Bradbury. I thought Garrett Bradbury would finally be gotten rid of. I didn't think he'd be our center this year, but he was. He got hurt, missed half the year, and we didn't lose a beat when he was out. Bradbury came back for the playoff game and was just steamrolled the whole game. So that was a reason they didn't win. Hopefully he's not back next year. But number 6, Irv Smith Jr.'s farewell. Again, I thought we would finally be rid of him this year. I didn't think he'd actually play. Unfortunately, he did play. He had a key drop in that Eagles game in week 2. He had a key drop in the playoff game in the first half that killed the drive. Just an absolute turd. Absolute turd. And I think he'll be gone next year. That'll be another one of those addition by subtraction things, but we're beyond the point where we can do addition by subtraction because we have subtracted everything. We need addition by addition at some point. Number 5 reason, good vibrations. I just thought the vibe would be better because we got rid of Mike Zimmer. Earlier I talked about Mike Zimmer and his in-game management. This is more a intangible thing. Just the cloud of fear that the players seemed to play under when Mike Zimmer was coaching. The fear of making a mistake. And that was the reason I think they were 13-4 this year. That is, I think, 90% of the reason they won a lot of those close games, particularly early in the season. They just felt more relaxed, played with less fear late in games, and so they were able to make plays. And that kind of wore off as the season wore on. Late in the season, you didn't see as much of that magic. And I think that magic's going to be gone going into next year. But that is a reason they were 13-4, but that was not enough to get them once they got that division crown. That was all kind of wearing off, and once they had to start actually playing well and not just kind of playing free and loose, they started getting their butts kicked, and they just couldn't pull it together in the end. Number 4 reason, Kevin O'Connell. Next year we'll tell us how good a coach Kevin O'Connell is. I think this year was just Mike Zimmer being gone. It was just a load off the players' minds and allowed them to just make some more plays. And that's just not going to happen next year. And I think Kevin O'Connell made some really bonehead coaching decisions this year that the team kind of overcame in spite of his coaching. How he handled Ed Donatel or didn't handle him and just let the defense just completely fall apart and do nothing to change how badly it was playing, how badly they were scheming it. And you can give him credit for the 13 wins. Well, he showed an inability to the whole nice guy thing. Well, you shouldn't have been a nice guy to Ed Donatel. That hurt us this year. Number 3 reason they didn't win, Justin Jefferson. They didn't not win because of him. They didn't win because they went away from him. I think in the last 3 games of the year, he had a total of 100 yards receiving. A total of 100 yards. Because they just stopped throwing to him. The Green Bay game, he's wide open in the end zone. Could take a 7-0 lead. Cousins doesn't look at him. Fourth quarter of the playoff game against the Giants. Cousins doesn't look at him. Doesn't throw to him at all. He was your best player by a mile. He was the main reason you won 13 games. And you ignored him late in the year when you really needed him. A lot of this blame for number 3 goes to Kirk Cousins, but it's also, you didn't win because so much of your team is tied up in Justin Jefferson being successful. Your wide receiver, that's a problem. You're just not going to win when your only really good player is a wide receiver. Number 2 reason, Za'Darius Smith. Za'Darius Smith was a monster the first half of the year and really, I think, elevated the play of that team. And he was a big reason why they were so hot early on. And then he, I think, got hurt. And I just think he's probably old. His body's worn down. He just had nothing left. And basically, without him, we had nothing. Like, he was the only guy in the defense who brought anything. He was kind of the only one who Ed Donatel's scheme couldn't hold back, maybe is another way of saying it. And once they lost him, they didn't have him late in the year. They got worse late in the year. They just weren't going to win late in the year without him. And my number 1 reason they didn't win the Super Bowl is Dalvin Cook. It's not all Dalvin's fault that they keep giving him the ball to lose 3 yards every other play. Run him up the middle on 4th and 1 to lose a yard. Doing all these screens to him where he loses 3-4 yards at a pop. Having him tackle himself, trip over his own feet, never break a tackle. It's not his fault that they see this happen over and over again and expect him to magically make plays when he never makes them. But also I would say Dalvin Cook is even more than Kirk Cousins. Cousins has this reputation for coming up small in big games, which is well-deserved. Well-deserved. Look at the Eagles game this year. Look at the Cowboys game. Look at the Packers game. But Dalvin Cook, just never steps up in big games. Ever. He's another one where it would be kind of addition by subtraction, but the bottom line is if Dalvin Cook leaves, they're not going to stop dumping off to the running back rather than throwing to Justin Jefferson in the big moments. They're going to still do it. They're going to still run him up the middle. Whoever they replace him with, up the middle. When the defense has 9 guys in the box, up the middle. So I don't see a way around this. But bottom line is the Vikings didn't win the Super Bowl because coaching wasn't up to snuff. Talent wasn't up to snuff. And you watch the teams that are still in the playoffs and they're just so much better. Better coached, much more aggressive, better attitude. So we'll see what happens next year. I pretend not to be optimistic. I pretend that I don't believe the Vikings are going to be better next year. But deep down, I think they'll go 17-0. Of course, I'm just pretending.